Hariom, everyone. Welcome to Booklight. We'll begin with an opening prayer, followed by a bhajan, a short introduction, and then we'll get started with our satsang for the evening. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavit Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Janakalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahmavidvaram. I'll now pass it off to Shruti, who will be doing a bhajan for this evening.
Hari Om. So I'll be singing a short shloka followed by a Ganesha bhajan. Shundamandita Suprabhankataralam Simhasanastham Prabhum Shatkona Bhujagam Himadritanaya Sunam Prasannanam Siddhyalingita Vakshasam Sunayanam Bhaktauga Kalpadhrumam Mantradishah Patim Mahaganapatim Vande Maheshatmajam Jagavandana Adhakhandana Jagavandana Adhakhandana Nagaharadhara Shivanandana Jagavandana Adhakhandana Nagaharadhara Shivanandana Jagavandana Ganapati Vishwakarana Vignavarana Vishwakarana Vignavarana Vishwanatha Shiva Girinandana Vishwakarana Vignavarana Vishwanatha Shiva Girinandana Jagavandana Ganapati Modakadi Sakala Bhaksha Bhojana Mushikadi Devya Varavahana Modakadi Sakala Bhaksha Bhojana Mushikadi Devya Varavahana Ikshudandadhara Jagatkarana Ikshudandadhara Jagatkarana Krishna Dasa Jana Dukha Bhanjana Ikshudandadhara Jagatkarana Krishna Dasa Jana Dukha Bhanjana Jagavandana Adhakhandana Nagaharadhara Shivanandana Jagavandana Ganapati Gauri Nandana Gajanana Girijanandana Niranjana Parvati Nandana Shubhanana Pahi Prabho Mam Pahi Prasannam Gauri Nandana Gajanana Girijanandana Niranjana Parvati Nandana Shubhanana Pahi Prabho Mam Pahi Prasanna Gauri Nandana Gajanana.
Thank you, Shruti. Welcome everyone to Booklight. This is Booklight 3. At the end of 2019, a group of us, Sevaks, got together, led by Swami Sarveshanandaji and Shubhani Ji, to put together a little bit of an initiative to get us more connected during this time. This is all pre-COVID, mind you. And the vision that we set out at the beginning was to connect us, the next generation, to Gurudev more intimately. We saw in Booklight 1, we must, taken by so many different Swamins across the world. In Booklight 2, we saw As I Think, essays on nation building, followed up by a special series to cope with the challenges of 2020. Today marks the day of Booklight 3, our first session. What if you haven't been here for Booklights 1 and 2? No problem. We're happy to have you. And it's like we're starting fresh. The topic for Booklight 3 is Sadhana Pancakam. Sadhana Pancakam are a set of sadhanas given by Sri Adi Shankaracharya Ji. And these sadhanas will be contextualized, knowing that we're talking about them in the year of 2021 and the unique challenges that we have during this time. How to approach 2021 with a healthy mindset. However, different than our usual virtual satsangs, our Booklight 3 is going to have a little bit different of a format. And we'll talk about that a little bit more after our satsang for this evening. So how the rest of the evening will go, we will have an introduction of our speaker for this evening, satsang. And then afterwards, I'll briefly present what our course is going to be looking like. You know, what's the week to week. Finally, at the end, please note your questions that you might have during satsang, because we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. Feel free to message them to me on Zoom. My name is Amar. You can click on Zoom. And if you're joining us via Facebook Live, please join us on Zoom if you want to ask your questions. We'd love to have you here. We'll be casting on Facebook Live through the CHYKWest Facebook page for every one of our satsangs. So we're happy to have you all join it here as well. I will now hand it off to Sahana to introduce our speaker for this evening. Hari Om, Sahana.
Hari Om, everyone. Brahmacharini Shubhani Chaitanya is the resident teacher at Chinmay Mission, New York. Born in Manila, bred in New York, and built in Bharat, she has grown through Chinmay Mission as a Balvihar child, a dynamic chick, and a graduate of the Youth Empowerment Program in India. Inspired by Puja Gurudev, she completed the Vedanta course in Sandipani in 2016 and was posted to serve as the resident teacher in Chinmay Mission, New York, where she now conducts Balvihar, chick, and adult classes. Shubhani Ji brings a natural wisdom and compassion to her classes and has the unique ability to connect to all age levels. We are very excited to start this new season of Booklight studying Sadhana Pancakam and learn from Shubhani Ji over the course of this series. Hari Om. I'll now hand it off to Shubhani Ji.
Hari Om. Before I start, can I just request everyone to keep your video on so I can keep an eye on you and make sure everything's going in? Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahmavitparam. We begin the session by invoking the grace and blessings of Bhagavan and our entire Guru Parampara as we begin to study Sadhana Pancakam. Adi Shankaracharya Ji was a profound visionary, and he had the depth of knowledge and the ability to convey it in such an easy method. We all know that, he lived only for 32 years. And although it was a short time, in that short time, he managed to write commentaries on the Prasthana Traya. He wrote commentaries on the Upanishads, on the Bhagavad Gita, on the Brahma Sutras. And on top of that, he wrote a lot of Prakarana Granthas. And not only that, he wrote stotrams, which exalt the glory of gods and goddesses. That visionary, when he was about to leave this world, his disciples said to him, they pleaded him, they said, before you leave us, give us something. Give us your parting words of wisdom on how we can live this spiritual life. And the final instruction that he gave before he left this world is Sadhana Pancakam. So Sadhana Pancakam is a very holy text because it's the parting words of Adi Shankaracharya Ji. Can you imagine a mind like that? With everything that he's studied, everything that he's written, everything that he's read, and he has to condense all of that information and put it into one thing. That thing is Sadhana Pancakam. And this Sadhana Pancakam, the beauty of it is that anyone can read it. If somebody is a beginner, then you will get the proper sadhana to start the spiritual journey. If somebody is in the middle, you'll get how to deepen your journey. And if someone is towards the end, you'll get what you're missing out and the things that are neglected in one's spiritual journey. Sadhana means, methods, ways. That's called sadhana. Panchakam means a bunch of 5. So this particular book, which we are going to study, Puja Gurudev's commentary on Sadhana Pancakam, is 5 verses of sadhana. And each verse has 8 instructions on sadhana, so totaling 40 instructions on how to live a spiritual life. This is also called Upadesha Pancharatnam, 5 gems, 5 teaching gems. It's also called Sopana Panchakam, 5 verses of 5 which are arising, which are like steps. They're steps on the spiritual ladder, because not only are they 40 instructions, but they're 40 instructions step by step and step by step. So with each step, we're actually going to take a journey and we are going to go higher and deeper in our sadhana. Now, when we say sadhana, sadhana means, as we said, means, but the means for what? What is all this sadhana for? So the sadhana is for what we call sadhya, the goal. The means is for the goal. And what is the goal? The goal is to be free. There was once a lion kingdom in a zoo. They were all captured. They were all captured and they were put in a zoo. And in this zoo, they couldn't, there was fences, there were people guarding it. There were all kinds of things that were binding them to this zoo. And so this lion community started forming different groups. They formed a history club and they formed a mathematics club. They formed a Vyakarana or grammar club. They formed a philosophy club. So they formed all these little clubs because you know what? They were bound. They were there. There's a fence. There's people surrounding them. There's people with weapons. What are they going to do? So the ones in the history group started writing lion history. Back in the day when everything was free, the lions were free and they roared in the forest and all kinds of things they started writing in history. Then they made a treatise on lion language, on Vyakarana, on how lions should speak and should act in this world. Then they made, lion philosophy. What is the philosophy of being a lion? What does it mean to be a lion? So they started all of this shastra, all of these different lion groups. And in and through these lion groups, they were busy. They were just busy throughout the day. One day, one new lion joined. And this lion came into the zoo. Was captured, came into the zoo. And all the different clubs wanted to recruit him and said, hey, join our club, learn lion language, learn lion philosophy, learn lion history. All of them wanted to recruit him. He said, no, I'm not going to join anything. And what did this lion do? This lion just did one thing. He stared at the fence. He stared at the fence because he said, my goal is just to be free. That's all I want to do. And he just stared at the fence. And day in and day out, all he did was think about how he was going to break free. And in the end, he did. So what is our sadhana? Our sadhana is to break free, to be free, to realize actually that we are ever free. We are like that lion in this samsara. But very few of us are staring at the fence. Many of us are getting caught up into so many things. Not to say that we shouldn't do anything. We should do just what is required to break free. Because that is the sadhya. That's the goal. Therefore, the sadhana is for the sadhya, for the goal. And the one who has this as the goal, being free, and who is applying the means, the sadhana, is called sadhaka, or what we call seeker. So when am I really a seeker? I'm really a seeker when freedom is my goal and I'm working towards it. Then I'm called a seeker. Only then am I really called a seeker. And once that seeker reaches that goal, which is nothing but themselves, that person is now called siddha. So we have seen sadhana, sadhya, sadhaka, and siddha. And so these verses we're going to study are going to take us to that sadhya, hopefully. And without further ado, let's start with with the verses today. Sadhana has put on chat, the PDF in case you need to read it. And if you have the book, you can follow me. I will chant, you follow. It's a little bit long, but don't worry about it, because every class that we do together, we will just do one line. But we will chant the entire verse so that it rings in our minds throughout the day. Okay, so I will chant and then you repeat in your own place. Vedo nityam adhiyatam taduditam karma swanushtiyatam tene shasya vidhiyatam apachitihi kamye matistyajyatam papoghav paridhuyatam bhava sukhe dosho nusandhiyatam atmecha vyavasiyatam nijagrahat turnam vinirgamyatam. We do together. Vedo nityam adhiyatam taduditam karma swanushtiyatam tene shasya vidhiyatam apachitihi kamye matistyajyatam papoghav paridhuyatam bhavasukhe tosho nusandhiyatam atmecha vyavasiyatam nijagrahat turnam vinirgamyatam. Okay, so the first instruction by Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya ji is Vedo Nityam Adhiyatam. Adhiyatam means study. Vedo, Veda, daily. Nityam means daily or every day. Study the Vedas daily or every day is the first instruction. So now let us see this instruction word by word. First is, what is Veda? Veda comes from the root vid, which means to know. Veda actually means knowledge. It doesn't mean book per se. That's a secondary meaning. It means a body of knowledge, a massive body of knowledge. It's called Veda. And this Veda is very, very special because this Veda it's Anadi and Ananta. Anadi means it's beginningless. Ananta means it's endless. When did knowledge come to play? This Veda, we say, is eternal, but discovery of certain things in the Veda take place at a certain time. Just like gravity is eternal. It's always there. But the discovery of gravity happened at a certain time. So knowledge per se, this Veda is eternal, but discovery of knowledge has a beginning. The same way, knowledge doesn't have an end. It is endless. But application of knowledge may have an end. The application of a certain type of knowledge can have an end, but its knowledge goes on and on and on. So this Veda is something that is so sacred, it's beginningless and it's endless. It's eternal. And not only that, but this Veda, what makes it so special is it's apaurushaya. Apaurushaya means Vedas are not written by humans, by man. They're not written by man. They are revelations. They are revelations to our great rishis at the seat of their contemplation. So they are directly, we say, Yasya Nishvasitam Veda. They are the breath of God. So there's no individual who's writing this. And that's important because when an individual writes something, when an individual takes up a project or writes something out of his or her own intellection, 4 defects can be there. The 4 defects are, number 1, Brahma. Brahma means delusion or wrong notions. Because our knowledge, you and me, is based on our mind, the state of our mind. So when our mind is in a good state, then everything's clear to us. Everything seems so nice and rosy and beautiful. But if our mind is in an agitated state, then we will say, oh, what is this knowledge? I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense to me. So our knowledge that we acquire in day-to-day life is based on our state of mind. But in revelation, it is a purely sattvic, it's a sattvic, predominant, pure sattvic mind. So there is none of this defect taking place. Next is pramada. When we write our own knowledge, create something, we have what is called negligence or pramada. We cannot go in depth. Our knowledge is limited. So if we're trying to describe something, we're trying to say something, we only have a certain kind of, width that we can work with because it's not that deep. But being that this is a revelation from Sarvagnya, that all total principle, all knowing, all capable, all strong principle, being that this is a revelation from Sarvagnya, there is no limit. It doesn't have these shortcomings that you and I would otherwise have. Another defect we have when we write, we compile our own things, is karana apartava. Karana apartava means that there's a defect in our senses. Sometimes we're reading something and we miss a word and the context goes really off. Or we're hearing a lecture and we miss a certain line or 2 lines, and when somebody asks us what was the lecture about, something completely different, we will tell them. So there's a defect in our senses. We do it all the time, right? All of us do it all the time. There's a defect in our senses. We don't read things properly. Even if one juice box we buy, we don't read the ingredients properly or the price tag properly. There's a defect in our senses when we're not alert. In the state of revelation, it's pure revelation. Your senses are not really working there. And one other defect that we also have when we create our own work, when we read personal works, is this vipralipsa. People tend to twist knowledge based on their personal agenda. So if I have an agenda, let's say, if I have an agenda and I want all of you to become brahmacharis, I'll say, my agenda is I want all of you to become brahmacharis. I will take up this Sadhana Pancakam and twist it entirely and say, Adi Shankaracharya says, practice brahmacharya. Everybody must take brahmacharya. I will completely twist it because that's my agenda. Huh? But these rishis are so pure that there's no agenda. The agenda for every single person in the Guru Parampara is the evolution of the other. There's no other. There's nothing else in the mind. So these defects are not there in the Veda. These defects are not there in revelations. These defects are not there in revelations. They're not there. And therefore the Veda is apaurushaya. It is so incredibly sacred. So, sometimes we might think, why not study any other book? There's so many books by so many different authors, by so many different people, and they're also great books. They are great books, but they're not apaurushaya. They're not defect-free. And not only that, they're not pramana. Veda is what we call pramana. Pramana means it's a valid means of knowledge. For atindriya vishaya, for anything that is beyond the ken of senses, the means of knowledge is the Veda. The authoritative means of knowledge is the Veda. It is pramana. So to know the time or to know what the news is, I don't need Veda. I can just, Google and find out the news. Or to know the time, I can just look at my watch. You don't need Veda for that. But for things that are beyond the ken of the senses, Veda is the means of knowledge. It's pramana. So that's what makes the Veda incredibly sacred. Now, what encompasses this whole Veda? You see, when people, when they went to Gurukula, which is really cool, I kind of wish that I was there back in the day to study in Gurukula. Because when you went to Gurukula, you studied 14 spheres of knowledge that comprises this whole Veda. You studied the 4 Vedas, Rig, Sama, Atharva, Yajur. You studied that. Then you studied the Vedangas. You studied the Vedangas first, because the Vedangas are limbs of the Veda that you have to know before you enter into the Veda. And what is that? Shiksha, it's phonetics, Kalpa, about rituals, Vyakarana, grammar, Nirukta, etymology, Jyotisha, astrology, Chandasa, prosody. You studied all of this. Then included in all of this, you studied the Upavedas. You studied Ayurveda. We all know now Ayurveda, how wonderful it is. Dhanurveda, the art of warfare. Gandharva Veda, about music. Sthapatya Veda, about architecture. Artha Shastra. This was there. Not only that, you studied Nyaya, Mimamsa, Dharma Shastra, Purana. So imagine if you went to Gurukula, you studied all of this. You knew all of this. When you went to school, this is what you learned. Now we're learning like math and science and, So this was the greatness of our culture. It is still the greatness of our culture. So now Adi Shankaracharya ji says, study the Veda daily. Oh my goodness, does he mean that I have to study all of this daily? What does he mean? So now we are in different times. What he means is, in the Veda, broadly, there are 2 parts. One is the Karma Kanda and one is the Jnana Kanda. One is the part about Karma, another Jnana. In the Jnana Kanda, we find the Upanishads, or what we call Vedanta. That is the essence of the Veda. So even in Gurudev's commentary, he says, the Upanishads, study the Upanishads, because that is the essence of the Veda. And that's also what we call Vedanta. We all say, okay, we're studying Vedanta, Vedanta. What is Vedanta? Vedanam Antah Nirnaya, means the conclusive teaching of the Veda is Vedanta. It's not that it comes at the end of the Veda, because Upanishads don't always come at the end, but it's the conclusive teaching of the Veda is Vedanta, which is Upanishad. Now the question comes, but I'm studying Sadhana Pancakam. I'm not studying Upanishad. So here we say that everything that prepares us for the Upanishad is what should be studied. So that study the Veda means study the Upanishad. Study the Upanishad, Vedanta means every single thing that will prepare me for it, I should study. That is what he means by Veda. Now, why do you want us to study the Veda? Now we understand what the Veda is, why it's so sacred, why you want us to study the Veda. You see, that all the books, all the texts that prepare us to the Upanishads, that give us that knowledge, they give us the clarity of life. This you cannot find in any WhatsApp message and blog and post and Facebook and all of that. The overall vision of life is what we see in our books like Sadhana Pancakam. These books will tell us what is the goal of life. how should I live my life? What should I do at every single stage? That clarity of life, that sense of purpose, this is what you get in these texts. Whenever we're not clear about something, we waste a lot of time, we waste a lot of effort, and then again we have to repeat. We're not clear about our career. What happens? We get into the wrong career. We spend so many years in that career. After so many years, we say, I should have done something else. I should have done this. And if I started this, I would have been a pro by now. We take up the wrong degree in college. I'm also guilty of that. Then means something that maybe you just had to pick something, so you picked it. Like that, you pick something, then midway you realize, oh no, I have to change my major, isn't it? It happens to all of us. But there's no clarity. So you know what? We rush into something. There's no clarity. We just rush into something. Oh, this is happening. Let me just do it. And so much time, so much effort, so much energy is wasted in that. And then again, we have to work to bring ourselves back. So lack of clarity, it brings us down in life. We're a step down. We don't know what we want. These texts will tell us this is the overall vision in life. This is the direction one should be headed. And these are the steps one should take. Now that is something very valuable. Now, why else should I study these books, particularly these books? Because these books are inspiring. They're really, really inspiring, and they can keep our minds up and high. We all know that we don't experience the world as the world. We experience the world as per what we think about it. So as I said earlier, if my mind is calm, then I'll experience a very beautiful and lovely world. If my mind is very agitated, I will experience a very terrible world. So what I'm experiencing every day is my state of mind. That's what I'm experiencing every day. So what's the weather like? Is your mind sunny? Or is it drizzling? Or is it snowing? Is there a snowstorm? You check your mind. Nobody needs to go to Google. You check your mind, and accordingly, the whole weather will be. These kinds of texts have the ability to lift our minds to greater heights. That's the kind of text I need to pick up. Right now, in today's world, there's so much information overload. There's so many people emailing, WhatsApp, but go to Signal and do this and do that. And there's so many people sending us so much stuff. All of this stuff is coming our way. What should I do? Read those books, those texts which keep your mind up. We don't need any more garbage in our minds. Because the kind of mind we have is the way we will see the world. And not only that, but the highest dharma right now for you and me as a seeker is to keep ourselves inspired. It's very easy to fall off the path, especially now the pandemic has happened. Then we don't know. Then there's a vaccine, but then it's taking too long to get. And you don't know if the vaccine is going to be okay for the new strain of virus. Like constantly, everybody's on the edge, everybody's on the edge, everybody's on the edge. It's very easy to get depressed, very easy to feel down. Then you can't physically see someone. How long will you stay in the screen? How many satsangs will you have in the screen? It's so some days you can just be like, this is just crazy, right? And I get it. It's true, it happens. But when our mind is kept in these texts, it stays inspired. It stays rich. It stays okay. It's comforted, Please don't think, Bhagavan Rama went to exile. He went on quarantine for 14 years. Pandavas went on quarantine for 13 years. They went to the forest. They went to the forest. They had to live on the floor, live on fruits, roots, all kinds of things they had to go through. You and I are in exile in our own homes. It's not that bad, huh? And we have, well, we have the internet, we have each other, we have Zoom, whatnot. We have everything here. We have Uber Eats. My goodness. I mean, it's not that crazy, right? It's not so bad. And if we keep our minds in these texts, it's you really know that it's really not that bad. In fact, there's a lot of growth and a lot of depth that can happen in this season. I'm going to pause for a moment and say, I don't think there's going to be a Q&A today because I have to finish a couple of things. So I hope you don't mind, but next time I'll work it out, okay? Because this is such a way that I have to complete one thing in one session. And on a side note, when Swamiji said that, I freaked out because, we finished this text in 5 sessions and he's asking me to do one thing in one session. But Bhagavan has blessed us. So we move on. So this is why we need to study. And these particular texts. Now, and not only that, but there's so much to learn. The more we learn all of these things about spirituality, about the Veda, about how to live life, there is so much more to do, so much to learn. And with that vast body of knowledge, if we don't do it every day, when are we going to get to it? So that is why we should study these kinds of scriptures, and that is why we should study daily, to keep ourselves inspired, to keep ourselves in something high, to learn these shastras. Now, and to remind ourselves of our purpose. Now, this word study, what does it mean? Well, this word study is really deep. First of all, he says study, not read. So many of us read and we think we study. That's not study. The first point about studying is there must be a system. There must be a system. So it cannot be like, yes, every day I am keeping my mind inspired, but one day is this YouTube talk, one day is this other book, one day is this Kindle thing. Every day there's one thing there, and I'm keeping my mind inspired that way. No, that doesn't work. There must be a system, because when we study, we are building on thought. We are not just getting inspiring thought, but we are building on previous thought. When I study different books from different places in different areas, I am just making little puddles. But when I am studying one book, 1 or 2 books in depth, I am digging a well of knowledge, because one thought can be built after another, can be built after another. So when I study one system, it's like I'm building a building, one step after the other. So when you read Puja Gurudev's study scheme, every single book, he says Kindle Live, then Bhaja Govindam, then Tattva Bodha, then Manashodhanam. Every single thing is building on prior thought. So you can get deeper and deeper and deeper into the texts. So when I study, there has to be a system. It cannot be that I'm studying whatever I feel like studying. That's not study. Now, also when we study, there has to be a thought flow. So to have a very clear thought flow, that can only happen when I am doing it in one line, in one book, in one order. Otherwise, the thought flow will be very murky. The second point about study is the word used is study, not read. So what has to be done here? There's a very beautiful Subhashita. It says, Acharyat padam adatte, padam shishya swamedhaya, padam sabrahmacharibhyaha, padam kalakramena cha. The first quarter when we study, Acharyat padam adatte. So we can study with a teacher, Acharya, or when we are studying a book, then we ourselves can study this way. But how to study? First, we must see the words in that particular book. If it's Sanskrit, if it's English, whatever the words are, we must see what the words are and make sure we understand those words. And we understand that particular sentence. What does it mean? Vedo nityam adhiyatam. Study the Vedas daily. Next is, we have to see what is the connection of what we're studying with the previous thing, the previous chapter, or the previous note, or the previous page. We have to make the connection. It can't be just like, okay, now page 2. But what is the connection with page 2 with page 1? That also, that we should be very clear. Why is it in this order? What is the connection? Next is, when we study, Gurudev, if you see his study scheme, he gives 3 stanzas or 5 pages or 1 mantra. The key to studying is not to read more, it's to read less. It's to read less. Because with what I study, I must remember, after I look at it, after I analyze the words, I analyze the connection. The next thing I have to do is see 2 or 3 key points from what I've studied. What have I retained? This part we never do. We never do. We read something, but we don't say, okay, what are the 3 key points that I've retained? And because we don't do this exercise, and it's a very simple exercise, we forget. Therefore, when I study, even now when we listen to a discourse or whatever, 2, 3 key points I have to keep in mind. This is what I got. That's important. And that should be done right after I read or right after I listen to something. Because the longer time we delay, the more we forget. Then after study, the next point is I have to reflect. So the first point is there has to be a system. The second point is I have to study. The third point is I have to reflect upon it. Reflect upon it is, how can I take what I've read, what I've looked into my life? How can I make it tangible? This conversion has to happen. Right now, how is that tangible? How can I apply that in my life? So if we're doing Vedo Nityam Adhiyatam, what am I studying? Is there something that I'm studying? Is there, how have I been studying it? How much have I retained? So these kinds of things I have to look into myself to find out. And the final point is, after reflecting, and in this reflection also, you can discuss with other people. That's why it says, 1/4 is you learn from your Acharya, 1/4 is from your own reflection, 1/4 is by discussing with other people. So in this reflection, you can also discuss. And hence, Amarji will explain to you, we will have discussion groups also. The final point is that a part of studying is wait, be patient, because things don't become clear all the time right there and then. Sometimes it takes time. You know why? Because the mind is murky, it's clogged. The purer my mind becomes, the more I'm able to understand. So you will notice that one book you picked up before, you didn't get it. Now you pick it up, you're like, oh my God, this is so deep. That happened to me with Mahabharata, Before I read a little bit, I was like, okay, it's this story. Now I'm like so extremely fascinated by it. I'm like, wow. So sometimes it takes time. That's all that has to happen, because our maturity has to build. Okay, I think this much is enough. I will just summarize in 1 minute, and then this much is enough for today. Done. Sadhana Pancakam, Adi Shankaracharyaji's final parting words. He says it to his shishyas, to his students, in 5 verses. In each verse, there's 8 points, so a total of 40 verses. The first point we did was Vedo Nityam Adhiyatam, means study the Vedas daily. What are the Vedas? A sacred body of knowledge, which is apaurusheya. It's a revelation and it's an authoritative text. And it comprises of such vast, wonderful different themes, as we've seen. But for me, what does it mean? It means study the Upanishad. Anything that helps me prepare for the Upanishad is what I should study. Why? Because that particular text can give me clarity and a sense of purpose in life. And why should I do it daily? It reminds me of my purpose and it keeps me inspired, which is very necessary. And plus, it's a lot. So it's good to do it daily. And what does studying really mean? Studying means, 1, there must be a system. Point number 2, I must study it, by word, the explanation, the connection, the key points. 3rd is, I must reflect upon it, how I can make it tangible to my life and even discuss it with others. And 4th is, just wait. It will become clear as time comes. So this is the first instruction of Adi Shankaracharya-ji. And the next one we will see in the next class. Okay, so Hari Om.